All right, Mr. Chair, we are live now. Oh, did Graham just get booted off? Michelle? I believe he did. We'll just wait a minute for Graham to come back.
Don't know what happened there.
Welcome back, Graham. We're live and we're ready to go when you are.
Okay, thank you very much. I call this meeting of the Canmore Subdivision and Appeal Board to order. My name is Graham Locke. I am chair of the SDAB and I am a public member. And I would ask that all questions and presentations be presented through myself, through the chair. And the board members, I'd ask the board members now to introduce themselves, starting with Ms. Coos, Ms. Mara, Mr. Scott. Oh, you're on mute, Michelle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Michelle Coos. I'm a public member of the SDAB and also a vice chair of the SDAB.
Mara.
Thank you. Through the chair, my name is Karen Mara, and I am the council rep on the SDAB board.
Mr. Scott.
I'm Harry Scott. I'm a public board member.
And the clerk for this hearing is Ms. Bravo Stewart. Ms. Stewart, are you there?
I am here. So I'm Katie Bravo Stewart and I'm the SDAB clerk for today's hearing.
Thank you. And before introducing the appeal, I'd now ask each member of the town's administration in attendance today to introduce themselves, starting with Ms. Noel, Ms. Miller, Mr. Henry, and Mr. Bjorga.
Hi there, I'm Jolene Noel, and I'm the meeting administrator for today.
Thank you, Ms. Noel. Ms. Miller?
Good afternoon, members of the board. My name is Lauren Miller. I'm the manager of planning and development here with the town of Canmore, and it is our department that is responsible for the issuance of the permit that is under consideration today.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Mr. Henry?
He might not be able to chat yet. He's just connecting.
All right, Mr. Bjorga then, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Eric Bjorgi. I'm a planning technician with the town of Canmore, and I'm the development officer for the file in front of us today.
Thank you, Mr. Bjorga. Has Mr. Henry joined, or shall we move forward?
I am here. Sorry about that. I was having some connection issues, but I am Marcus Henry, the supervisor of the planning department here at the town of Canmore.
Thank you, Mr. Henry. Now to the board members, are there any additions, deletions, or changes to the agenda as it has been provided? Seeing none, I would move then that the agenda be adopted as circulated, and all those in favor, please. Thank you. Unanimous. There are no minutes that we have to approve at this point, are there, Ms. Bravo Stewart?
There's none for this agenda, Mr. Chair.
I beg your pardon?
There are none for this agenda today.
Thank you very much. Then I'll introduce the appeal that's before us today. This appeal is in regard to an application for renewal of a bed and breakfast permit, and is appeal number PL 20210477. And I'd now ask the appellant or their agents to identify themselves to the board. I believe that's Mr. Keenan.
I just kindly remind everyone in the audience today to please keep your audio and video off until you're called upon by the chair. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Edward Keenan, and I live in the attached unit to the subject property and the other side of the duplex.
Thank you, Mr. Keenan. And do you have any objections to any of the board members sitting on this appeal today?
I do not, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. And have you received the full agenda package as provided by the the administrator of this file from the town?
Yes, I have, with the exclusion of a letter that was included with our original application. I believe Katie, the clerk, had forwarded that information earlier today.
I don't believe we have it in hand yet, do we, Ms. Bravo-Stewart?
No, Mr. Chair. So that was the item that was missed in the agenda package. So I was going to bring it up once all the introductions had been completed. But if you want, there was an email that was supposed to form part of the appellant's submission for the SDAB hearing today. I had missed that letter, so I do have it. It has been circulated to all the parties, which includes the appellant, the applicant, and the file manager. So I could either read it aloud when it comes to that portion of the hearing, or I could circulate it now if the board wants to accept it as new information.
I think if you read it aloud at the appropriate time, that would be fine. At what point did you suggest that would happen?
I believe it would be when we get to, I would just assume when the appellant goes to present, he could either read it out loud at that point, or I could read it out loud, one of the two.
Okay, Mr. Keenan, is that acceptable to yourself? Would you be prepared to read it in at the appropriate moment so that we're sure we have it in the file?
I can certainly do that, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, that would be super. Thank you. Now I'd ask the applicant to identify themselves to the board. I believe that's Mr. Morris.
Hello, Mr. Chair. My name is John Morris. I'm representing the applicant. My wife is at work today, Maggie Morris, and unfortunately she will not be able to join us, so I'll be here solo. Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. Do you have any objection to any of the board members on this panel today?
Not at all.
Thank you. Have you received a complete copy of the agenda package distributed to the board?
I have, and I looked at the letter that Ed sent in today, and I have no objection to that, and I will address that during my my time when it's due.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. Then the hearing process, the town has a process that we follow during the SDAB hearings. Administration will make a summary presentation of the matter before the board, at which point the board members are free then to ask questions of the administration to understand clearly what is before them. The appellant will speak in favor of the appeal, and then any questions that the board has to clarify and make sure they understand the appellant's submissions would follow that. And then if there are, I assume, Mr. Keenan, you are the only appellant speaking to this file, so there'll be none others following you. Is that correct?
As far as I'm aware of, yes, Mr. Chair.
I believe that to be the case. So then Mr. Morris, as the applicant, will speak to their views on the appeal as filed, and the board then would have the opportunity to make sure they understand clearly what Mr. Morris is presenting to us. I don't believe there are any others on this matter today. So, but Ms. Bravo-Stewart, if there are, please make sure we're aware of it, and that will allow us to streamline our process a little bit.
Absolutely, and I can confirm that there's no additional parties wishing to speak in support or non-support or neutral to the subject appeal today.
That's great. And Mr. Keenan, Mr. Morris, I would ask that you at the end of that presentation, when Mr. Morris presents his rebuttal to the material that's been presented, I will give each of you the opportunity to clarify any misunderstood issues you've heard from the others' presentations, so that we're clear that we have a complete understanding of the issues before us. So there will be a clarification or closing remarks from the appellant first, then a clarification or opposing remarks from the applicant. And then we can ask the town's administration folks to give the same clarifications or closing remarks from their point of view. The purpose of the hearing is for the appellant and the affected parties to provide the board with information to the appeal. So the board must make its decision based on the planning merits. And as outlined a moment ago, affected persons will certainly be given an opportunity to speak. All speakers, please ensure that all comments are directed to the board and that all comments be of proper decorum and succinct. That would be much appreciated. If any person presenting is referring to a written document, including a map, photograph, or report that we do not have in the package, make sure that the clerk does get a copy of that material. And once the board closes the public portion of the hearing, we will then go in camera to review the information we have received, and the board will then provide a written decision within 15 days of this hearing. Does Mr. Keenan, do you have any concerns with the process as outlined?
It seems all very clear to me, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Mr. Morris, any concerns over the process outlined?
No, not at all.
Thank you very much. Then I would now ask that the development officer make their presentation with respect to the appeal.
Just really quick, Mr. Chair. Is it John Morris and Edward Keenan? If you could please mute and turn your cameras off while administration presents. Thank you.
Good afternoon to the members of the SDAB, to those of the public present in this meeting and those watching via the live stream on the town's website. My name is Eric Bjorgi. I'm the development officer for the town on this file, and I will share a PowerPoint presentation with you shortly. Okay, so the file before us today is PL 2021-0477 at 442 Stewart Creek Close. Summary of the statutory requirements before you, including the date of decision, the date of the appeal being received, the appeal meeting, and the relevant communications to the parties, as well as advertising on the town website. And the statutory requirements are deemed to have been met. Overview of the file before us today. It is a renewal of an existing bed and breakfast with one guest room, which is an accessory use to the duplex dwelling. The initial approval took place on July 9th of 2020. And as is typical for new bed and breakfasts, are approved for approximately 1-year term. This permit expired in November of 2021. Application for renewal was made. There was no record of complaints being made against the bed and breakfast during its initial term of operation. And accordingly, the application for renewal was approved. Following the notice of decision advertising on the approval, the town did receive inquiries and concerns from a neighboring resident, which were addressed directly with the applicant and operator at the time. And I'll also point out that just up front that there's a real estate listing which is attached to the application package today as part of the appellant submission. The town's review and recommendation is based on the information we received with the permit application. I'd leave it to the applicant to explain the information and clarify what's contained within the real estate listing. To orient ourselves to the area, it's a little bit dated air photo. The street looks a lot different today, a lot more construction filled in on the lots, but you can see the subject property outlined in blue on the map. The zoning districts, land use districts, which form this area, the lot is within an R2A SC low density district. There's also a detached residential district directly to the south. And here's an image of the front of the property. You can see the right-hand side of the duplex 442 is the location of the bed and breakfast. The policy background that's relevant to the review of this application. The district standards for the R2A SC district are found in section 3.21 of the land use bylaw. There are the specific use regulations for bed and breakfasts, parking regulations, the definitions of the relevant uses, as well as discretionary use evaluation criteria. The Canmore Municipal Development Plan mentions bed and breakfasts as accessory residential uses and encourages them as a form of commercial accommodation as well as a small business opportunity for residents. The Municipal Government Act provides our guidance for decisions on discretionary uses as well as decisions of the Subdivision and Development Appeals Board. So getting into the details of the application, these were documents that were submitted with the original application, and there were no identified changes in the renewal submission at that time. So you can see this is the site plan view with the unit 442 on the upper portion of the screen. You can see the parking layout with the red arrow showing the B&B parking on the upper portion of the driveway on the screen, as well as parking for the dwelling in the garage. The main entrance to the dwelling is highlighted in yellow, number 1, and then towards the back is a basement entrance to the which the guest room can be accessed through as well. This is the main floor plan of the dwelling. So you can see the front door entryway. The dining area is the main dining area for the dwelling unit is highlighted, as well as the breakfast area on the main floor. The rental bedroom for the bed and breakfast suite is highlighted in blue. This is the one guest room that is approved to be rented under the permit. You can also see the stairway leading up to the main floor, as well as in orange the coffee, wine bar, wet bar is highlighted as well. So reviewing the application for conformance with the land use bylaw, attachment 3 in the staff report has a detailed bylaw conformance review. And sorry, that should say no changes were proposed from the original approval. No variances were required or requested as part of the application. Again, following the approval, we received several concerns, which I'll address in the following slides, but basically fall under these 6 categories that you see on this slide here, which I'll go into detail right now. So the first issue is the advertising of this bed and breakfast on short-term rental websites. So our department response to this concern is that bed and breakfasts are inherently short-term rentals, and we do not prohibit advertising of bed and breakfasts via these types of websites, as long as what is being advertised is in accordance with their approved permit and the relevant land use bylaw regulations. The separate entry to the basement area where the bed and breakfast room is located. So I've copied the clause from the land use bylaw, which talks about this requirement. And it says that access shall be provided through the principal dwelling unit and not solely through a separate private entrance. As we've seen in this case, there is access to the basement area. And in conversations with the applicant, it was clarified that the customers of their business do have the option of entering through the primary entrance or through the the basement entrance. There was a concern that there may be a full kitchen in this basement unit. Again, the relevant land use bylaw clause is that there may be no cooking or food preparation facilities in bedrooms or suites for use by guests. And in this case, there's a photograph in the staff report, which is provided by the applicant, showing a wet bar with a sink and a coffee maker and countertops. This is quite typical of what we see in bed and breakfast developments, and to us does not constitute cooking or food preparation facilities. Concerns were raised over the parking for this development. As we saw on the site plan, there are 2 independently accessible stalls available on the site. One is in the garage, as well as the bed and breakfast parking to the side of the driveway. And I'll note that we had no parking related complaints related to the operation of this bed and breakfast prior to our recent decision on the permit being made. So the issue of whether this is more accurately described as a bed and breakfast or a tourist home, this question was raised. And we would highlight the key differences between those 2 uses, and the detailed definitions are found in the staff report. But essentially, the key difference is a bed and breakfast requires a permanent resident of the dwelling to operate a bed and breakfast as an accessory use to the principal use as a long-term dwelling for the primary resident. Tourist homes, by contrast, do not require a permanent resident and allow an entire residence to be rented out for short-term rentals. The other key difference is that bed and breakfast suites as an accessory use are not permitted to have a kitchen, to have a full kitchen or separate kitchen facilities. And we do not consider this to be a separate dwelling unit. The wet bar and the lack of cooking facilities mean it does not qualify as a dwelling unit to the planning department, and it is accurately described as a bed and breakfast. The last point that was raised was enjoyment of the residential area. So there is indeed a clause in the land use bylaw that says bed and breakfast developments shall not interfere with the rights of other residents to quiet enjoyment of a residential neighborhood. So our interpretation of this clause is quiet enjoyment relates to nuisances. These are observable disturbances such as noise and traffic. There's no indication that this has happened here. We don't have any record of bylaw complaints or other types of complaints being brought forward to the town that would indicate that that's occurring in this case. We'd say that objection to tourists being in a residential neighborhood is not a relevant planning consideration in this case, as bed and breakfasts are a listed discretionary use in the district, and given that, there will always be tourists associated with bed and breakfasts in residential neighborhoods, as it's inherent in the use of a bed and breakfast. Based on this information, we've recommended approval of this application for renewal, and our conditions are attachment 6 to the staff report. The options for the SDAB in this case are to approve the application subject to our recommended conditions. There is also the option to approve with alternate conditions, and in this case, we would encourage the board members to consider if there are particular aspects of this application that are found to be objectionable, that those could be clarified with conditions to make alterations to the operation in this case. There's also the option to refuse the application or postpone pending submission of any additional details. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Bjorga. Board members, any questions of Mr. Bjorga? Ms. Coos?
No questions. Thank you.
Ms. Mara? No. Mr. Scott? Only one, Mr. Bjorga, in my read, if I remember correctly, there was some issue around the timing of posting of this particular application for renewal. And I just want to make sure we're clear on if that produced any issues in this file.
Yes, so that was an unusual aspect on this file. So in this case, the decision was issued much earlier than the appeal period started. And this, under the land use bylaw, the appeal period does not start until the notice of decision has been posted on the property. So in this case, an adjacent resident noticed the advertising in the newspaper, which happened earlier to the notice being posted on site. But subsequently, the applicant was back in town and was able to post the notice on the property, and the appeal period started at that point.
Okay, so all procedural matters were appropriately dealt with.
Yes.
Thank you for that, Mr. Bjorga. That concludes our questions of the administration. If there are no other matters to deal with from the administration, I'd like to move over then to Mr. Keenan's presentation and his views on the application.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Excuse me. I'd like to thank the Subdivision Development Appeal Board for this opportunity to provide information as to why I filed an appeal to the development permit for the bed and breakfast operation next door at 442 Stewart Creek Close. As mentioned, Jody, my wife Jody, and I own the attached duplex located at 438 Stewart Creek Close. Reason for my suit today is because I work in the hospitality industry. And I was in front of a board as well, of course. But one of the reasons we purchased a home on Stewart Creek Close instead of an area such as Spring Creek was that the area was not zoned to allow for tourist accommodation or vacation rentals or Airbnbs. Our home is our sanctuary away from the daily stresses of hospitality. My wife, Jody, to be clear, works as an engineering assistant actually with the town of Canmore. Earlier this year, on March 3rd, precedent was set when some of the board members here, along with Jim Bell and Peter Giraldo, ordered the development permit PL 202-10394 be denied. And the primary reason for this denial was because the suites contained cooking and barbecue facilities. As Eric has mentioned, under LUB 8.3.0.11, a bed and breakfast development shall not contain cooking or food preparation facilities in the bedrooms or guest suites. The lower unit at 442 Stewart Creek Close, according to the real estate ad, does in fact contain cooking facilities and a dining area, which can be referenced in the package that I provided. I actually have a screenshot. I'm not sure if I can share my screen or not, just to point this out so it's clear.
Absolutely. You can share screen.
Thank you.
No worries.
Hopefully this will work. Can everybody see my screen there?
Oh, so it's showing, yeah, so there's a PowerPoint presentation, but it just hasn't been activated yet, so it's not starting yet.
I have it showing on mine.
There we go. That's perfect.
So this is a screenshot that I took this morning from Royal LePage Realty. And it shows on here within the listings that it does come with a kitchenette and a Murphy bed. So in fact, the unit down below can actually probably sleep more than 2 people. But also the inclusions, it says basement, fridge, stove, dishwasher, and microwave, which to me would seem that there are evidence of cooking facilities. These are the photos taken from the real estate listings. It shows a full-size fridge, a sink, and a microwave. The dishwasher and stove and oven is not present, but it is listed in the listings. On the photo on the right, you can also see that there is dining facilities in the suite below as well. Solely based on this information, along with the subdivision development's appeal decision on the permit PL 202-10394, this application should be denied. I would also like to point out further that John or Maggie have provided different information to planning for their submission on March 23rd. And this is a photo that was provided to planning, not showing a full-size fridge, microwave, dishwasher, or stove. Further to that, they did not post the required notices outside their residence until Jody brought this to planning's attention. And I hate to think that perhaps by not posting any notices, no complaints or anybody even knew what was happening. As indicated previously, there was very little business in the last year, partially due to COVID. And that's probably why we didn't see a lot of activity at John and Meg's place. The other thing that we need to have within the signage, LUB 8.3.0.13 requires bed and breakfast operators to install a sign which conforms to the signage guidelines as outlined in section 9. And the purpose of that is to provide identification to guests. To date, no sign has been installed. So the neighbors may not have even been aware that there was a bed and breakfast operation happening. And that sign is indicated on the drawings that Mr. Bourget had presented earlier. I also want to point out the parking is an issue. And I know this is one of the things that kind of gets around. The photo on the left is a photo that I took actually this morning. And this is fairly realistic. This is fairly normal. John has a beautiful man cave with lots of great stuff in there and sports equipment and so on and so forth. And rarely do they use the garage for parking. And in this photo, you can see that Maggie's car is across the street and there's 2 cars in the driveway as there's a fire hydrant in front of his place, so it doesn't allow them to park there. The photo on the right is the photo that John had provided to Mr. Bourget earlier. With that, I'll stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Edward. Would you be able to send that to me at the end of the hearing?
I absolutely will, Katie, 100%. So yeah, both owners have their own vehicle and generally park in the driveway, as I said. And also the lower suite features a separate entrance with a keypad, an interior door that separates the lower suite from the owner's main living area, which allows the owners to rent out the unit when they are not there. And in fact, last summer, I personally witnessed guests accessing the lower unit when the owners, John and Maggie, had let us know they were going to be away at the lake. So this application, in my eyes, is clearly a workaround to operate an Airbnb style accommodation in an area not zoned for tourist accommodations or vacation rentals. Also, as supported by the real estate listing, John and Maggie have listed their home for sale. So I'm wondering what the motivation is to continue with this application. With the information that we have provided to planning, I would ask the SDAB to check with planning to see if they physically inspected the premises as an option to them under LUB 8.3.0.10, where it states the development officer may inspect the bed and breakfast development to ensure compliance with this bylaw and development permit. There's been no complaints, and I agree. There hasn't been a lot of activity there. If we weren't paying attention to what was going on, we may not even be having this hearing today. Stewart Creek Close is intended to be a residential neighborhood. And it's my understanding, and Eric can probably look into this, that during the initial development application, up to 10% of the homes on Stewart Creek Close were to have an accessory dwelling unit. And that would be helping to address the housing crisis that we have in Canmore. If in fact this was supposed to be an accessory suite and contains cooking facilities with a separate entrance and a lock off from the main living areas, under LUB 8.4.1.1, it states that accessory suites shall not be used as a bed and breakfast, home occupation class 2, tourist home, or visitor accommodation development. So to summarize, the unit contains a full kitchen, according to the listing. It has a separate entrance with a keypad and an interior door separating the basement from the main living area. Also, the idea of a bed and breakfast is the host is to greet their guest and welcome them in. To suggest that they access the unit separately from the back door is more in relation to an Airbnb rather than a bed and breakfast. The parking, as I pointed out, is inadequate. The signage is not posted identifying the property as a bed and breakfast, and the owners have not provided full disclosure to planning. Lastly, under the Municipal Government Act, Section 687, 3, C, and D, the development appeal may do a number of different things, and I won't go through the whole thing, but what it really comes down to, if the proposed development would not unduly interfere with the amenities of the neighborhood or materially interfere with or affect the use, enjoyment, or value of neighboring parcels of land. The proposed development conforms with the use and prescribed of the land or building in the land use bylaw. So it is going to affect my enjoyment of my property, having people coming and going that I have no idea what's going on there. And the secondary to that, because we are attached, it is not a single family home. If there's a bed and breakfast attached to me, that does affect my property's my ability to market my property if I was so desired to do so. So the approval of this Airbnb disguised as a bed and breakfast will materially affect my use of my side of the attached duplex. And in closing, actually, I kind of wish this never come to this, John. Resolve this matter. I like you both. You're great people. I certainly wish you all the best after you sell your home and whatever new adventures you might come with. But yes, I'd also want to thank the SDAB for your attention and your consideration in this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Keenan. Board members, questions of Mr. Keenan? Ms. Coos?
None at this time, thank you.
Mr. Scott? Ms. Mara?
I have done it this time.
No, and nor do I, Mr. Keenan. I thank you for your presentation and the information. We'll then now move to Mr. Morris as the applicant and hear his presentation. Mr. Morris.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for holding this today. If you don't mind, I'd like to share with you just, I did my screen so I can share a little PowerPoint that'll help kind of emphasize how we're feeling and our, I guess, our rebuttal to our neighbors' concerns. So I'll give this a go. I'm not super tech savvy here, so I'll do my best to.
Yeah, there should be the share screen at the very bottom of your screen there. Like there's like the menu bar at the bottom.
Okay.
And then you just select, there you go. And
How's
then,
that?
yeah, that looks good. And then you'll just have to start the slideshow. There you go.
All right. Thanks,
Perfect.
Kate. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of give you an outline of, wanted to address Ed's concerns and also just give you a little bit of background about, if you guys likely probably have a few questions from the first 30 or 40 minutes of this hearing. So just to let you guys know, we moved here. I've lived in Canmore for 7 years. First of all, lived in the Ledges, And we decided to, I met my wife about 6 years ago. We've had 2 kids since, and needed a bigger place. One of the challenges I'm sure you're all aware of is for young families in Canmore is making ends meet and finding sustainable ways to live here. So we looked at purchasing a new place for our family. And at the time, my wife was was not working. She was relatively, a few years new to the country, and we really wanted to find a way to make it work in this beautiful town. So we decided looking, nearby, and one thing that really caught our interest was the fact that there is these duplexes that were zoned for bed and breakfast. So we said, you know what, why don't we purchase one of these? It'll be good for our family, and in the future, if this is something that we may, need for, based on what our future careers holds, this is something that would always be an option for our family. So that's what gave us the idea to purchase this place at 442 Stewart Creek Close, and to open. We never ever had an interest of running a full-time bed and breakfast. I'm a part-time athlete and part-time firefighter, and my wife, has a part-time job as well right now. But we're both trained chefs. Cooking is something we've loved to do. If you ask any of our neighbors, that we're very social individuals, and we like hosting. And I've even had, I think almost every neighbor on the street over for a coffee or a beer over the last year or so. So it's something that we enjoy doing. So we decided to open a bed and breakfast. We applied, we went through all the processes. It was never our intention to be full-time, but we thought this would help sustain, complement our income so that we could continue to live here. I wanted to show you this to emphasize this point of how, small time or part-time this would be. We opened in the summer of 2020. Since then, we've had a total of 5 paying guests. So since June, I believe, of 2020 until currently, here's the dates we've hosted. This is directly from what we submitted to our taxes. This is 100% of what we've hosted any paying guests. So as you can see, we've hosted a total of 13 nights and 5 different paying guest groups. We have had friends and family here. It's a wonderful place to visit, and that, for the most part, was one of the main reasons we wanted to have a basement option like we have, was so that we could host friends and family, because we don't have any friends and family that live in town. And that was a pretty big option for us. So I'm not going to read this whole letter to you. I can't remember, Katie, if it's been provided or not. We have put, when we applied for the initial permit and the renewal, we put this letter out. This letter was in conjunction with the appeal notice, or the notice of a permit signage that we put on our front. And essentially what I'm not sure if you guys can read this. It might be pretty small font for you, but it is a note for my wife, who is essentially going to be, the chef of this bed and breakfast. That I'm a mom of 2. We love this town. We're trying to make things work in this town, and we've applied for a bed and breakfast permit, because this is something that we'd like to possibly pursue. Our goal for sure is not, we have 2 young toddlers. We do not want to be hosting anyone here that's going to be partying. We strictly mention that when we advertise, and also that we don't accept anyone that, we even have an inkling that is going to be here to party. We usually host couples or young families as well when we have hosted. And we clearly outline this to our neighbors, because if this is our community, which it is, and this is our only home that we own, that we want to make sure that we keep the peace with the neighbors. So we've actively engaged with our neighbors. We let them know, we let every one of our neighbors know, either verbally or through this letter, what our intentions are with this bed and breakfast. And at the time, our initial application, Ed did not live next door, so we never, we never chatted with him about it. But the second time we did the renewal, which was earlier this year, we essentially updated this letter, and it essentially said the same thing. So we've actively tried to engage to keep the peace with our neighbors, because I've stayed at places that are short-term rentals. I totally understand, and would never want to be that person that is, is the reason for disrupting a great neighborhood. We have received a lot of support from our neighbors. We didn't ask any of them to come. We didn't want to put them in that position of trying to pick sides on what neighbor they wanted to back up here. But we have received lots of support from our neighbors, and I just wanted to include an email from one of our neighbors. Can you guys read that, or would you like me to read that out?
Oh, we can read it. Thank you.
Okay. So I'll give you guys a few moments to read that. But again, we've engaged with our neighbors. We feel like, just as it is hard to find, affordable accommodation for friends and family that are in town, we thought this would be something that would be one of our preferences, is to when our neighbors or anyone in the area has, let's say they're having people coming for a wedding or friends and family in town, we would be able to provide that option for them in a safe and comfortable environment that, if they didn't have the space, we could provide that for them via our bed and breakfast. So has everyone had a chance to read this?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So now I'll address the more particular objects that Ed has outlined. Firstly, this is the separate entrance. So we do have a main entrance that comes, via the front door. This is our separate entrance. Again, one of the motivating factors of purchasing this property was because it had a walkout basement and a separate entrance. Not necessarily for bed and breakfast, but obviously that's a bonus. And when this really came into play is when we were initially getting all of our permits in line to make sure we qualified with the town for a bed and breakfast. We met with Diane Luca, who's the public health inspector at AHS. And while we were meeting with her, we had lots of questions. We wanted to make sure we did it right. We said, obviously we're in the middle of COVID here, so is there any recommendations or guidelines you have for COVID? And she said she strongly recommended that when hosting during COVID, that we minimize guest contact and allow separate entrance as the best option. That is why, and we have never once said to our guests, you are only allowed in through the basement suite. But in all honesty, in today's day and age, when you go to a new town, there's a preference of guests to not interact as much with bed and breakfast or with hosts as much, maybe as a more traditional bed and breakfast in the sense. So we would love to host. The bottom line is, the last 2 years have kind of been COVID related. And the point I want to emphasize here is that the public health inspector that we met with strongly recommended that we allow this separate entrance as the best option for guest entrance. So I hope that clarifies that situation. We've never once closed our front door. Now regarding parking, Ed has mentioned that we have a home gym and we have no parking in the garage, no parking options in the garage. Therefore, we don't qualify for a bed and breakfast. Well, we built this gym during COVID because the gyms in town closed and we weren't allowed. And I was training to try to get to another Olympics. And this was the, what we had to do to make that happen. So we made a small gym in the garage. And I'm actually surprised, Ed. Again, I have respect for you. And I'm surprised you mentioned this because we have, on numerous occasions, you've seen us park our SUV in this garage, and especially during the winter. And I'm surprised that you're adamant that we don't have parking in the garage. Yes, we're a young family, and yes, at times we have chariots in there and things that young families have that take up a bit more space. But we have plenty of enough parking for one space. We never advertise 2 spaces in here, and there's lots of room. I took this picture today, just so you know. This is a picture taken today from our garage, and we have an SUV that parks in there whenever we need to. This is the outside. So here's a picture of the SUV being parked in there, and here's the outside showing two more spots, essentially fully qualifying for the parking as per the direction of the town for a bed and breakfast. Some more concerns of Ed's I'd like to address. I just added these as I heard him say this. So our real estate listing, we have listed our place on MLS with a realtor. Are we excited to sell? Heck no. we want to stay here. Regarding the stove, that was an error of our realtor, and I didn't notice that. So that was, we don't have a stove down there. We would have to get a totally different permit to be a legal suited basement to have a stove, and we never wanted that. So we don't have a stove. I wanted to show you the pictures we have here regarding that kitchenette. So the picture on the right is the picture that we normally have down there. And that's essentially how, after communicating with the town, initially we thought it was okay to have a microwave. And we have a medium-sized fridge down there. As you can see, it's not a full size, it's medium size, not one of those Costco specials. However, from talking to the town, and it was deemed that we weren't even allowed that. Okay, so we removed that because we didn't want to do anything illegal with the town. The reason why those pictures are in the listing is because when we were listing, our realtor recommended, we had this in storage, and our realtor recommended that it will show a lot better if we show a full kitchenette down there with a microwave and a medium-sized fridge. Do I think those are cooking? Do I think you could cook a meal down there? Heck no. You can make toast, you can make coffee, and you can reheat things in a microwave. This is not even, shouldn't even be applicable because we don't have it. But we included it in the pictures for our listing because our realtor recommended it. And we do not have it set up down there normally because we wanted to make sure we adhered with the town of Canmore. Sorry, a couple more things I just wanted to address there. We have always posted our signage when it was first initially, Eric, I believe you can, I'm not sure if you addressed this or if you can back this up, but when I first got the email from Ed about posting signage, that we have to post signage for the renewal, I was in China at the Olympics. And I said, I'm here for another month and I'll be back. And as soon as I can get back, we can post it. It didn't really make a big difference anyway, because it's only from 21 days from when you post the signage. So I don't think that really had a major factor. After, we posted that was probably back in, would have been April, early April, or March. It would have been in March when I got back. The sign, my wife works during the day. I work 24-hour shifts at the fire station. When the one morning we got back, or Maggie got back from work, and the sign had blown over from a Chinook. That exact same day, we got an email saying one of your neighbors noticed the signs down. So I went and got probably the most reinforced stuff you could get. The next day I put it up, and I sent Eric an updated picture of a much more reinforced sign. That's what happened with the signage being down. Thirdly, can you guys see my picture here? You see me here? Am I?
Yes, we can see you, yes.
Okay, so this is a sign we had up. This was before Ed lived there, I believe. I don't know exactly when they moved in. This was our sign. Got it made locally in town, supported some nice local signing company, and we had this up. And during COVID, we decided we weren't really actively operating much. It was a busy time for us, and Maggie had just started a new job. We decided we weren't going to be, so we took the sign down, and we haven't, if you notice from those dates, we haven't hosted in a very long time here. So we do have the sign. There is a at the front of the driveway, just to the left of the garage is where we would have it. It's, if and when, I guess, this appeal process goes through and we decide to start operating again at a part-time level, we have no problem putting that back up. And lastly, I know that Ed mentioned that one of the motivating factors he had when purchasing the home was that he was going to be part of a residential neighborhood, that there wasn't a lot of tourist disturbance. I couldn't agree more. And one of the motivating factors for us was when we built this home is that it was zoned specifically for bed and breakfast. And we didn't want to host a short-term rental. This is not our second home, but then we always wanted to make sure that was an option for us. So that was a very motivating factor when we built this home from scratch a few years ago. And this part-time bed and breakfast would allow us to be able to sustain our living in Calmar as a young family. I've met tons of young families that used to live here that moved to places like Cochrane because they couldn't make ends meet. And we love it here, and we don't want to be one of those families. So we look for zoning that allowed for this. We also believe we've fully complied in what the town has asked of us in the process. And if we haven't, please let us know. And that's all I have for you. Sorry, I was curling all weekend and I can barely talk here. It sounds like I'm about it. It sounds like I've been yelling. I've been all weekend, but sorry about my voice. And, that's all I have for you. I wanted to thank you for your time. And this is on behalf of our family. And unfortunately, my wife couldn't make it today, and our kids are at daycare. So.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. Would you please be sure that Ms. Bravo Stewart gets a copy of your presentation with those supporting documents that you did provide? That would be great.
You betcha, will do.
And board members, do you have any questions of Mr. Morris? Mrs. Coos.
Not at this time, but I may have a couple of questions after we hear all rebuttals.
Thank you very much. Mr. Scott? You're on mute if you do have.
Yes, Mr. Morris, I'm curious about 2 or 3 things here. Number one, I noticed that, or at least it appears in one of your initial diagrams, that I think the table upstairs, the dining table, is colored blue. Does that mean that is where your wife would serve breakfast in the main unit, or is it taken downstairs, or do you not serve breakfast? I guess that's my question.
Sorry, Ash, that's a good question. I should have clarified that, Mr. Scott. Initially, when we, our initial idea is to host in our main kitchen, which is upstairs. I can show you that right here, if you can see. This is our main kitchen. Oh, right there. That's our initial idea, was to host there. When we met with Diane, and she mentioned that during COVID, they highly recommend against any contact with guests. So we said, okay, well, what do we do about the actual eating process? And she said that you should provide a place for them to sit down and have breakfast down here. So what we did at the time was we provided, and this was based on a friend of ours, Hillary, who owns another bed and breakfast in town. She said that you can provide almost like continental style breakfast. So that's what we provided in the fridge, with fresh baked bread and granola, had the whole 9 yards, and we put it on that table for them, so that if they wanted the option of not being safe and comfortable and not being around people during COVID, that they had that option. So that is why that table's down there.
Okay. One of the other questions that I had was, how do you actually advertise your to get clients? It's not, you haven't showed us anything how you're doing that. Is it through a website? Is it, what have you got? Is it, how are you attracting clients?
Well, based on the recommendation again of our friend who owns a bed and breakfast in town, we asked her while we were going through this process, we said, how do you advertise to your clients? And she said, well, for the most part, we do it through Airbnb. And I said, well, I thought Airbnb was only for short-term rentals. And she said, well, there's actually a part of Airbnb where that you put as what type of listing it is, and you put it as a bed and breakfast. So when we are in operation and when we're accepting guests, we operate through Airbnb via their bed and breakfast hosting option, which we don't try to hide because in today's day and age, that's the best way to market your place. And it's up to, for the most part, that's the best way to advertise. Does that mean we're getting short-term rentals? No, we're getting people that want to come here for a bed and breakfast experience, and we're advertising that fully. If you would look at our listing there. So
Could you by any chance provide us with that? We have not seen that. It would be something that I think the board would benefit from looking at.
I don't have it right now. We've actually taken it. How it works is you have to have an active listing, and we don't have an active listing right now because we're not taking guests. So I can provide that link to you guys as a follow-up if you'd like. I'm not sure how I can do that if it's not active, but what I can do is I can try to copy and paste, all of that into a PowerPoint and send that to you if that's what you wish.
I guess I'll ask the chair whether that would be okay or not.
I think as a subsequent, submission, that might be helpful, just for purposes of clarification and understanding.
Okay.
So if you could provide that to Ms. Bravos Stewart, that would be great.
Okay, I will do. I can probably get that by the week's end here. Or
That would be helpful.
Another thing, sir, is instructions to your clients. You by any chance have a copy or anything that you can provide us with your instructions to your clients so that you can see how you're operating your business?
Yeah, again, that is in the listing, so we can send all of that over. Initially, how we advertised was, obviously, come through the main door. Again, when we met with Diane, when she said and gave us her strong recommendation that separate entrance is the best way to go, that's when we emphasize that more in our listing. However, that's something that based on communication with the town and your recommendation by Eric, I guess we have no problem, putting both options or whatever you guys recommend. We have zero problem with either one. So just so you know, what I didn't mention this earlier, but one of the direct instructions we have that we provide to our guests is when you arrive, and I'm reading this quote because this is one thing I did write down from our listing. When you arrive, please park on the right side of the driveway, as this is the allotted parking spot for our bread and breakfast guests. So that clearly indicates where they can park, which gives them the quickest and easiest access to the home. And then when I provide that listing to you guys, it will show exactly instructions that we provide to our guests.
Okay. And this is during the 5 times that you had guests there, were you actually in residence at that time, or your wife?
Yes, we were. I'm just trying to think of, let me go back to the dates. Okay, the dates were September 5th to 7th. Yes, October. I might not have been personally. My competition is in the winter, so some of these were winter dates. But I know my wife was. I believe one of the August dates, we had a friend of ours, one of our best friends, who lives 2 blocks away. We went to, one of the things that we're a little bit, we paid for extra insulation so that whoever's staying downstairs wouldn't have to hear the people but it doesn't seem to work that well for the insulation from the 3rd floor to the 2nd floor. So one of the, with 2 young kids, we were a little bit self-conscious that our guests are going to be disappointed that they're hearing young toddlers. And that was actually one of the feedback from one of our guests, our initial guests. So I believe during one of the, you can't see my screen right now, but I'm referring to one of the August dates in 2021. We had our best friend Kayla stay here and she took care of our guests while we went. I believe we went to our fishing camp at that time to the lake. So that was the one time that we weren't here. We had one of our best friends taking care of it, and part of that motivating factor was we didn't want to, be too loud for our guests. So
I think that's all my questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Ms. Mara?
Thank you. Through the chair, and Mr. Scott just asked my one question I had regarding Mr. Morris, regarding the daily breakfast procedure. Do you, when they stay more than one night, do you interact with them daily, or do you just like how do you do that? Or do you put it in for the whole time they're there?
As per our instructions, we say we are available. If you guys ever need something from us, please do not hesitate to contact us. Usually what we'll do is, I think most of our guests have only stayed for 2 to 3 nights. So what we do is we provide them with a breakfast. Usually it's about, a full carafe worth of homemade granola. We bake them a fresh bread. We provide them with, some fresh berries, the whole 9 yards that would allow them to eat breakfast comfortably for that time period. We mentioned to them, if there's anything you need, please do not hesitate to contact us. We are either very close by or our friend Kayla would be able to help you in that instance. When we did have a group of a couple that was here for about 5 days, this was probably almost a year and a half ago now. What we did is we replenished our supply. We were here. We said, hey, please let us know when you're getting low, and we'll happily replenish your supply, and let us know what you like best, and we'll make sure we replenish that the most. So about 2 or 3 days in, they said, hey, we're getting low on this. And my wife prepared them with more of that option. And they were very, very, one thing I will also share with you when we share the listing is the customer feedback, because we did receive 5 out of 5 stars, and we got great customer feedback because we did, customer service is imperative, and we wanted to make sure we engaged in a very positive way with our guests.
Thank you. And you did mention, if I may, through the chair, ask one more question. There was a picture shown of a vehicle parked on the main road, and that was your wife's car. Did you say that? It's a sort of a Goldie SUV.
I can share it again if you'd like me to share it here.
I'm just wondering if it is your personal vehicle.
That's our personal vehicle. Yeah, we have a Nissan Qashqai, and it's a burnt orange Qashqai that we. Okay. That's our vehicle. Yeah.
So you would say, in your best to your knowledge, that most your guests are the ones that are parking in your driveway.
Yeah, we don't provide guest parking in our garage. The guest parking is on the right side of that driveway. Whenever they have been here, and I can't remember one time. We've had friends and family that have visited that have parked on the street, but we've never once had bed and breakfast guests that I can know of that ever did not park in the driveway.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mara. I have no further questions, Mr. Morris. I thank you for your presentation and the information. Oh, Ms. Coos, please.
If I may, through the chair, ask a couple follow-up questions.
I was going to hold you up till the rebuttal period is what I thought. Oh, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Mr. Morris, a couple of questions just to get a better understanding of what the guest room looks like. Bear with me, I'm going to ask some detailed questions, but just so that I understand what the guest suite looks like. First of all, is it just a bedroom, or is it a living room area, a lounge area there as well?
We have, what we provide our guests is the access to that basement floor, which is a bedroom, a wonderful TV room, kind of a flex room that we provide a workspace for them, and obviously that table that you saw, and that small, as we call it, like a coffee / breakfast station, I guess. So yeah, it's a wonderful area that that if I was a bed and breakfast customer, I would be 100% satisfied with it. And obviously when we host our friends and family, which is the majority of our visits, it provides us with a buffer between grandparents and parents, which can be pretty helpful sometimes.
Thank you. Just to get a better sense of the area and how it connects to the primary suite, is there a door that joins? And if so, where is it? Is it downstairs? Is it upstairs? And is there access for the guest into the main unit at all times, or just with your permission?
Well, if you don't mind, I'll share my screen with you and I'll take on a little tour if you guys have time. It'll take me about 2 minutes. How does that sound?
Please do, Mr. Morris.
Mr. Chair. Thank
No
you.
problem. I wonder if I can turn my screen around. Do you guys know how to do that, Katie? Can I? Anyhow,
Are you on a computer or are you on a
I'm on a
phone?
MacBook, so is there any way I can turn my screen around like you can on an
Yeah, I
iPhone?
think your camera is fixed probably to the front of your computer. Yeah, so you'll have to turn it.
Okay, so I'll do this and then let me know or stop me if you can't see well. This is our main kitchen. Okay, and here's our front door right here. And then as you come in, the basement goes down like so. And this is our bed and breakfast. So we have a TV room right here, which is where the second entrance would be to our backyard, and a fire pit. And this is our flex room slash. So there's a little workstation there. There's the bedroom, which I'm sure you're probably mostly interested in here. There's a bedroom for them. Bathroom here. And our, I guess, breakfast area right over here. So that is essentially our the basement that they have access to.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. Just a question relating to the door. Is the door locked on both sides? Or does the guest have access to the primary unit?
The guests have full access to the primary unit. When we were building the home, I specifically asked I actually contacted Bylaw at the time, and I have to say it was a very complicated process. It probably took 3 months to figure this out, but they, I said we want to have a potential bed and breakfast here, and I said, what kind of door do we need? I said, do we need one that's like a fire rated door, and essentially, eventually he got back to me and said, no, you need a door just like every other door in the house. And this is exactly what that is, which is the exact same door that you'll see on every bedroom in our home.
And is there a lock on that door?
And yeah, the lock is, there is a lock on the door, yeah.
And which side locks? Is it both or just?
Yeah, this inside locks, we never, I don't remember when we've ever locked it before, so. But it does lock. It's a lockable door, just like any bedroom door.
Thank you. Then in addition to the coffee bar that you provide, do you provide access to a barbecue or any other cooking amenities for your guests?
Well, the only barbecue we have is on off of our main floor. So this is our main floor. And to be honest with you, if our guests wanted to barbecue something, I would say, you're welcome to come. I can help you out. I don't know if I would have full faith in them barbecuing without with us not being here. But if they really wanted to barbecue something, I would help them out and probably barbecue with them.
Okay, thank you. And then a couple other questions. You noted that the refrigerator and microwave that are in the pictures in the current real estate listing, they were put in recently. Can you let us know when those appliances were put back in the unit?
Well, they were initially down there shortly after we moved in. And then after communicating with the town, and they actually it was never said to us to remove the fridge.
Okay.
Never once was told us, first of all, it's not a full fridge. It's about 60% the size of a regular fridge. And when we did, the microwave was removed when the town advised us that there's not allowed any cooking in there, or remind us that, we removed that. I don't even think that microwave has ever been used, but we did remove it, and it has been in storage. And to reiterate the point about the fridge is that when we met with Diane, We showed her the fridge. We had to actually have, for our food safety handling, we had to make sure the fridge was at a certain temperature all the time to make sure that the food was safe for handling. And it was never once mentioned to us that we are not allowed this fridge and a 2/3 size fridge in this unit. And it still has never been communicated to us via the town or via anything that we need to remove this fridge. We do not mind whatsoever if that's the reason why that would hold us back from a bed and breakfast permit. We have no problem removing that.
So has the fridge been in the guest room since you, or while you were operating your B&B?
Initially it was, yes. Initially it was, and we were under, I guess we were oblivious to the fact that we were not allowed to have it. And I have to be honest with you, from a common sense point of view, I don't really understand why a 2/3 size fridge is not allowed. And especially, for the most part, as I mentioned before, we have friends and family there, and so they use that fridge. We use it when we had a continental breakfast there for our guests, but it had been used. And then I don't even remember if actually I clarified that with Eric about the fridge. He did tell me about the microwave and anything cooking related. I asked him about a toaster, and he said, he doesn't deem, I don't think he deemed toaster, something that would be a cooking item. But I have no problem with anyone from the town coming over and telling us what we can and can't have. Okay. Do it, and we'll take it out. Like we're not trying to pull a fast one here. If it's getting this nitpicky as to why we can't have a bed and breakfast permit, this is one of the reasons I have to say that is a bit of a, we didn't think we were going to have to go through all this when we applied, and it is a little demoralizing, I have to admit.
Mr. Morris, I can appreciate your frustration. I'm just simply asking these questions so that I can understand the facts and apply it to the wording of the LUB, which is the existence of cooking and food preparation. Sure. So I bear with me. I'm not trying to nitpick. It's frustrating.
Sorry for getting frustrated.
But I just want to get an understanding of how it corresponds with the wording of the LUB, which of course we're obligated to apply in the circumstances. My last question for you is whether or not there are pots and pans, bowls, plates, and knives, cutting boards, that sort of thing in the guest room.
We have there in the guest room itself, nothing. It's just. Do you mean the bedroom or the guest?
In the breakfast bar or coffee area.
We have some light utensils. There'd be some smaller plates. And we have wine glasses and coffee mugs, but nothing else that would be cooking related.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. I appreciate your responses.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. At this point, Ms. Bravo Stewart, I wonder if I don't know whether a little recess might be appropriate for 5 or 10 minutes. I just want to clarify in the period now as to, since Mr. Morris is going to be providing some subsequent documentation as to the timing on our decision. Is it based on when that material arrives, or is it when this hearing is concluded? I think effectively the hearing concludes with the receipt of all information, which would include Mr. Morris providing that information to us, which I think he said he could do by the end of the week.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, go ahead.
So I'm just wondering, does the 15 days start then, or does it start today after we've finished our chat?
It starts today once the board adjourns.
Okay, so then the process then, again, the question of process is how do we then deal with the material Mr. Morris is going to provide us at a later date?
Generally, all the information that the board needs to be provided the day of the hearing. I'd have to have a quick look, if you could bear with me, if you wanted to take a few minute recess and I can have a look to see, just so that I don't give the wrong information, but I just want to make sure that it's my understanding that anything that's presented today, that's what the board needs to take into consideration when making your decision. It's just to make it fair for all parties because not everyone's going
Sure.
to see that new information that comes in.
Sure. So I guess that then does beg the question, Mr. Scott, as to whether or not it's appropriate for us to, require that information if it cannot be considered in our deliberations. So maybe that's the best thing. Let's take a 5 or 10 minute break. Well, Ms. Bravo Stewart checks that for us and comes back to clarify. And then, Mr. Scott, you can decide whether or not it's still something you require. And then we can go from there. And in the meantime, I would ask both Mr. Keenan and Mr. Morris to give some thought to their closing remarks and any rebuttal they would like to make to the other parties' information that they've shared with the board, because that's where we will go next after the break. So 10-minute break, Ms. Bravo Stewart, would that be enough?
Yep, that'd be fine. And I can, I also recommend if the applicant can provide that information today, I think that would be best if he could possibly get that during recess and have that sent to me. I just need clarification again on what the new information is.
Well, my understanding, and Mr. Morris, listening online can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's his bed and breakfast is not advertising at this point, so there is no website that we can go to look at it today. Can't be provided today, but he could cobble something together from his past experiences and provide that by the end of the week. So that was, I think, I understand the request as I heard Mr. Scott's request. So anyhow, perhaps everyone could think about that while Ms. Bravo Stewart clears the air on timing, which is, I mean, I don't see any reason why we couldn't call a pause to the process and reconvene when the information is available and with a continuation of the hearing, and all parties could be attendant at that time. But that's an option that I've seen in the past. I just want to make sure we do it the correct way.
Yes, Mr. Chair. So you can postpone today's hearing to a future date if you want new information submitted. And then that new information, I would put together another package that would be sent to all the board members and everyone, all the affected parties. And then we would have the hearing at a future date. And then at that time, that's when you would adjourn, and then decision making would commence 15 days after that. But if that information could be provided today, that would be ideal.
Okay, perhaps we could take a 10 or 15 minute break then, while Mr. Morris considers that and what could be provided or what clarification can be made.
Yeah, absolutely.
Scott's question.
So for 10 minutes, you said?
Sure, let's say 10 minutes and then we'll come back.
Okay, perfect. You'll just have to make a motion.
Okay, I move then that we take a break for 10 minutes at this point in time, or adjourn for 10 minutes in order that the applicant can consider responding to Mr. Scott's request verbally at this time. Okay, all in favor? Okay, we will see you all at let's say at
3:33.
3:33. Yeah, okay.
Perfect.
That's being very precise.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Graham, did you intend for us to have an in-camera among us, or
No,
you
no,
just
not
wanted
at
to?
this point, Michelle. We'll do that after. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure all parties are still online.
All right, Mr. Chair, just let me know when you're all back, and then
Yeah, the hearing is back in process.
Okay.
So, Ms. Bravo Stewart, can you give us an update on your understanding of the process?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I found, Mr. Chair, under section 629 of the MGA, so it directs the SDAB to accept any oral written evidence that considers proper in order to make a decision based on the proceedings today. However, if there's additional information that's required to make an approval, the SDAB would need to postpone the hearing to allow the applicant an opportunity to obtain that new information. And then you'd reconvene at a future date. It's just based on the disclosure of evidence. So the SDAB must rely on evidence that is presented to them at the SDAB hearing. So once we've adjourned the hearing, no new information can be received. So if the board feels that this is relevant information in order to make your decision, then we need to postpone. But if it's not relevant fact or evidence that you would need in order to write a decision today or within the 15 days, then I recommend that either the applicant provide it today so that everyone has it today. He can verbally state the facts up to the board today, or we would have to postpone to a future date if that's what the board feels they would need in order to make a decision.
Yeah, we would not close the hearing under that circumstance. We would adjourn pending the receipt of that evidence and that evidence being shared with all parties. And then we would reconvene and further question the material to make sure everybody understood it. So that being the case, Mr. Scott, I think it goes to you do you feel comfortable postponing the hearing to receive this information to make this decision? Or do you want to attempt to question Mr. Morris further to get the information you're seeking?
Mr. Chair, may I suggest that the board go into in-camera so that we can discuss this privately?
Sure, that would be fine. Ms. Bravo Stewart, can we adjourn to go in camera?
If that's what the board wishes, yeah.
Okay,
I'll just need a motion.
Yeah, just I would so move that we go in camera to discuss procedural issue related to this matter, and all in favor. And with that in mind, just let us know when the other parties are clear for the moment, and we can have the discussion. Okay. Does that mean it is happened?
Graham, you should have received an invitation to go into the in-camera room. If you haven't, I'll let Ms. Bravo Stewart know.
All I see is this portion of the meeting has been closed.
Okay, let me let Katie know.
Okay. Will the invitation be by an email or will it be?
It should be a pop-up on Zoom.
Okay, okay, not yet. I haven't seen it yet.
Can I interrupt quickly? It might solve our problems there, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Morris, I would suggest that you not, because they're technically in camera at this time.
Okay, I can provide them with a listing, I guess.
Yeah, so just.
Okay.
Hi, Graham. It's Katie.
Hi, Katie.
I'm just going to move you over, okay? Just one moment, please.
Thanks.
Hi, board members. I'm just going to recreate the room and then we'll go over. Give me 2 seconds, okay?
You bet.
All right, Mr. Chair, it's 3:56 and we're back in the main session now.
Thank you very much. And do we have Mr. Keenan and Mr. Morris monitoring at this time?
Yes, I'm present.
Yes. Mr.
Present.
Keenan, Mr. Keenan, are you there as well? Oh, you're on mute, but thank you. Okay, at this point then, having come out of camera, I'm going to ask Mr. Scott if he might just pose his two questions I think he had earlier to Mr. Morris. And Mr. Morris, I think you may have understood what he was seeking, and perhaps we're going to provide it if I understood your sentence a little earlier. So, Mr. Scott, could I ask you to just summarize I think it was two questions you had from Mr. Morris that he was supposedly going to submit in a few days, but perhaps can do so at this time. Mr. Scott.
Yes. To the chair. Mr. Morris, I think the two things, and they may be coupled. One was, how do you advertise? And I think you indicated you did it on Airbnb, but had a bed and breakfast option in there. And I guess the other question was, what were your instructions to your clients? And I think you said that that was also contained in that listing. I believe it's called a listing. Have you found anything that you could share with us that might help us today?
Yeah, I can share you. I found the listing. If I can share my screen, I can share you the listing that we've, again, it hasn't been up for a while, so, but I'll share with you guys if you guys want to see it, what we have. If that would help.
That would be helpful, because, you know, what we're really looking for is what you were using when you were actually.
Yeah, sure. And I will share that right now. Let's see. Okay, so can you guys see my screen here?
Yes.
Okay, so this is the listing. So it's, as you can see, it's unlisted. So if you go to preview listing, this essentially shows you what our guests would see. Here's our pictures. So if you want, I can show you all of our pictures. We have about 18 photos. And we have this, sorry, I'm just trying to move this Zoom meeting so I can see here. Okay. So we've advertised there's a dedicated workspace, self check-in, if you'd like, free parking. Here's our description right here. It says, I'll just open that up. Three Sisters Bed and Breakfast is a new charming B&B in the heart of the Rocky Mountains. Come and enjoy a Rocky Mountain getaway in our 1,000 square feet charming suite that covers the entire lower level of our home. Relax after your adventures. Do you want me to read it to you, or do you guys just want to read it?
No, go ahead and read it, please.
Okay. Yes. Relax after your adventures in our eucalyptus steam shower and have access to your own breakfast bar and outdoor terrace. Enjoy a delicious, healthy breakfast served by your host, who is a natural food chef. A perfect home base for all your adventures. The space, mountain views from the living room, bedroom, and terrace. Fire pit can be accessed by asking the host to help set up due to possible fire bans. Cozy reading corner and bedroom and workspace area and main living space. Breakfast will be served continental style, and we only use locally sourced seasonal farm fresh ingredients. A sample menu is provided. Other things to note. As per bed and breakfast regulations in Canmore, sorry, I got to move this again. We live upstairs under the same roof. However, you have full access to the 1,000 square foot guest suite downstairs, and I've adapted our business so that it is contactless and COVID friendly for your comfort. And that was based on the recommendations by Diane. So we provided that. That was, I guess, an update that we had put in there last year. I don't know what the new COVID regulations are.
No, that's what I was looking for.
So,
and then if I did click on and agree to stay,
yeah.
What would I be told for that? Is there any way that you can show that or not?
Well, it's not listed, so I can't click on it myself. If it was listed, you could click on, you put your check-in here and your checkout date here. You put how many guests you are, which we allow up to 3 guests because we have a bunk bed in that room. So if it's 2, usually it'd be 2 parents and a kid. We also have a crib if they wanted, if there was an, we've had a couple guests that have had infants with them. So yeah, if you wanted to, this is all you have to do if you've booked with an Airbnb. It's the same. I think what's worth showing though, for anyone that hasn't hosted on Airbnb before, I'm going to show you something that I think will help answer some questions here. So if you go to edit pricing, there's a place where you can put it as it might take me a couple minutes to figure this out here, but okay, right here. So property and rooms. So the property type is bed and breakfast. That's specific for, I think this is vital for actually for your future hearings as well, that because there's a big difference between an Airbnb short-term rental and a bed and breakfast listing, as we has come to the attention significantly in the town in the last few years. So when you're hosting on on Airbnb, you can put in as a property type bed and breakfast. The listing type, private room. So I can edit that. And if I was, let's say I was if I was part of a short-term vacation renter and owner in town, okay? The property type is different. You go to, which is most like your place. You go to apartment or a house or a secondary unit or unique space. So a lot of these ones that are, I guess, in town that are zoned as short-term rental units would put in here apartment or house or secondary unit where they're legally allowed to do that. We know we're not legally allowed to do that, and we don't want to do that here in our home. So we want to host a bed and breakfast. So we put that as a bed and breakfast option. The property type says bed and breakfast. How many total rooms does your property have? That has to be the entire property. So the minimum you could put is 2 to 5. And the listing type is a private room. And it also asks how many floors is there? There's 3 floors, and which floor is the listing on, which is 1. And so that's essentially how you can market and list through Airbnb. But I think the connotation of an Airbnb automatically assumes this is going to be a short-term place and it's going to be a nuisance for the neighborhood. And that's not necessarily the case, in my opinion. I've stayed at many. I've hosted at some in other places I've owned outside of Canmore, and I strictly know the difference. So and I can also answer a question you had about if we're here for when our guests come. I'm going to go back to the preview. Here's what our guests have said. Every guest we've had has left a review. They've all been 5-star. This one specifically, John and Maggie were fantastic hosts. We were arriving around nap time and they had the travel crib and bedding set up and ready to go. They were flexible with check-in and check-out times. There were a couple of missing items, but they responded quickly to messages and brought the items down soon after. We ran low on breakfast. I didn't know homemade granola is a little too good, and it was restocked in time for the next day's breakfast. There were nice additions. Anyhow, just to give you guys an idea, we don't want to be disruptive to this neighborhood. I guess I'll save that for closing, but do you have any more questions on the listing?
Yes, could you show us just above that? There's the amenities. No, I think it's just above there. Whoops, no,
Okay.
further back down, wasn't it? Where it shows what's in place.
Yeah,
There.
show all
What do
31
you-
amenities. Sure,
Yes.
no problem. We have bathroom items. We have bedroom and laundry items. And again, when we first put this in, this would have been over 1.5 years ago. We may have included, like, for example, the microwave. When I first read about the bed and breakfast rules in Canmore, I was quite certain it said you're allowed items for reheating. That's why we put the, I don't know who uses the microwave to cook anymore, but our understanding that a microwave is used for reheating. And based on the bed and breakfast rules that I remember reading a couple of years ago, you could have reheating items in the space. You just couldn't have cooking items, or so anyhow. So I'll scroll down this: heating and cooling, home safety, kitchen and dining. So to answer your question, I think there was a question earlier about, so we do have dishes and silver. We have, I don't think we have chopsticks, but we do have plates, cups, and some light dishes. We have a coffee maker. We don't have any barbecue. And that is the end of it. Breakfast is provided.
I think that does everything I would like. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. That and Mr. Morris too. That does help a lot in understanding the operation of your facility. So I think then with that, we are complete on the information from both parties and the town. So I'd move to closing remarks then that you would like the board to consider after having heard the other parties' information and any points you want to make in conclusion. So Mr. Keenan, do you have any closing remarks, comments, or clarifications that you'd like to make at this time? And please take your time and go through all items of interest.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of things that come to mind within the development approval. I believe it said a maximum of 2 guests in the room. John has just shared with us that room does accommodate 3 guests. And having heard John's presentation, I just want to highlight a couple of points for the board's consideration. And I agree with John in the fact that a bed and breakfast differs significantly from an Airbnb or a hotel in the way that the host interacts with their guest. In an Airbnb or a hotel, guests check in by themselves. There's lots of contactless type of stuff, or they check into the front desk, they go to a room. Within the room, they might find a fridge and a microwave and things like that, but they're not really interacting with anybody in the hotel at the Airbnb. With a bed and breakfast, at least the ones that I stayed at, the last one I stayed at was actually a beautiful spot in Montreal. And the guest was there the host was there to welcome us when we arrived at the property, showed us to our room, kind of explained the house rules, if you will, let us know what time quiet time was and what time breakfast was going to be. And if we wanted to interact with the family upstairs, we were very much welcome to do so. And in fact, they told us what time breakfast was going to be served on the main level. There was no breakfast facility downstairs for us because the nature of the bed and breakfast was to interact with the host and really get a sense for what is really happening in the community. John has shared with this board that in fact there was an occasion, it was probably the same occasion when I noticed that they were out of town and there were guests accessing the unit by themselves. And John's reason behind that was because he didn't want noise upstairs when the kids are running around and such, and I can appreciate that. But that in itself is the nature of an Airbnb. The bread and breakfast is where the host is there, the host is present, and not a friend of the host, but the host themselves. So this looks a lot more like self-check-in and a lot more like an Airbnb disguised as a bed and breakfast. Just in regards to the comment on COVID, I'm actually surprised, being in the hotel business, that operators were even allowed to continue moving forward. We shut down restaurants, we shut down hotels, we shut down all kinds of stuff during COVID. And I find it kind of curious that Diane would recommend that, but if she did, she did. We'll take that at face value. The other part that I got to say is there may not be a full kitchen in there. We don't know if we haven't inspected that. I still didn't see the other wall during John's tour, but it does show that there was some fridge and a microwave, and there is some information there that I don't know is completely clear on the intent. I purchased my home in November of 2020, shortly after COVID started. And I never once saw that beautiful sign that John showed. And is that not supposed to be mounted permanently to identify it as a bed and breakfast to the rest of the neighborhood? And I wonder if the rest of the neighborhood is even really aware of what was going on. And because there wasn't a lot of volume as a result of COVID, I could see that being kind of off the radar for most of us. In fact, had my wife not noticed the ad in the paper, this application would have been approved and gone through without any challenge, because there was no posting of the signs outside of the property until it was brought to planning's attention. And I know John said that he was out of town, and I know he was. We saw him on TV, but his wife was there, and she is the operator. So I'm just pointing that out, that maybe that wasn't exactly clear as well. The permit allows for 365 days of operations. Now, John and Maggie have not been operating very often at all. In fact, there was just a handful of times. But they're selling their house. And the permit stays with the property, not with John and Maggie. So what happens when the new person purchases that house and they now have a permit for a bed and breakfast operation with the setup of the keypad on the back door and the locking door between the lower and upper levels? Will the new owner operate in the manner that the bed and breakfast is intended? And then again, John admitted to being away while his guests were accessing his lower unit and he was at the fishing camp. The bed and breakfast permit indicates that the owner has to be present. So he has been operating outside of that requirement. And this area is not zoned for bed and breakfasts. It is a discretionary use. So I want to be clear to the board on that. And the planning department has the discretion to say yes or no. And I don't know that the planning department had all of the information available to them to make that decision clearly. And I want to echo John's position on this. This whole situation is horrible. Certainly not something that I ever wanted to engage in. I certainly don't want to be offside with my neighbors. I want to live in my neighborhood and get along with everybody. And I know I've spoken to a lot of owners as well who are not in favor of John's bed and breakfast application, but they don't want to get into a neighborly brawl or argument or whatever you want to call it. So a lot of them would prefer to sit on the sidelines, and I don't blame them for that. But because it's attached to my principal dwelling residence, I had no choice but to file an appeal, as under the Municipal Government Act, as I mentioned previously, it will affect my property value and my ability to market my property. If it was a standalone home, it might be a different situation. So with that, I do appreciate all of your time and attention and consideration to the points that I've raised. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Keenan. Board members, any questions of Mr. Keenan? Mr. Scott? Ms. Coos?
None, thank you.
Ms. Barra?
None at this time, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Keenan. The board appreciates your input today and your comments. And you can now stand down. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Morris, could we, do you have any closing remarks, comments, or clarifications that you'd like to make?
I do just have a couple. I'd just like to say thanks for hosting us today. I know this is not ideally how I think it would have been nice to see things end up, in front of council when we're 50 feet away from each other as neighbors. I can't help but say, it would have been nice to have had a conversation with my neighbor about this rather than discussing this in front of council, because I feel like I'm a reasonable person and I feel like Ed is as well. And it's too bad that we have to go to lengths like this when, I would totally understand if we're running an operation that was, disruptive to the neighborhood and, provide, where there had been complaints against, but we really feel that we've tried to really avoid that. Secondly, I can't help but say I have a recommendation for the town to avoid possible things like this in the future, because I don't think this is very much fun for you guys, and I don't think this is very much fun for Ed and I. And I would recommend to the town that possibly you expand a role with one of your staff, that maybe you have a consultant that deals with bed and breakfast and short-term rentals, because when we're applying for something like this, whether it's a bed and breakfast or a short-term rental, it would be nice to have someone that who could come out and really provide information and advice so that we can avoid this type of situation. We've invested thousands of dollars in this, and if you guys deem that it's not, not a permit anymore, then it was an absolute waste of time and money and resources for us, and not to mention Ed's time as well. So I think that that's something that I'd recommend, is to make sure that to avoid this in the future is to provide some guidance to people that are applying for this, because it's frustrating. And I feel, Ed obviously feels like he's in the right. We feel like we're in the right. It's a sticky situation here. And as a family, just lastly, we will respect your decision of a board. As I said, we've invested some time and money into this and getting the permit. We feel we've done everything fair and within the town guidelines. I would welcome someone to come over here and provide us with more guidance as to what we're doing wrong. Like if something as simple as a microwave or a separate entrance, or is going to stop someone from having something that they thought was legal in the town, and I believe that we can take more progressive steps to avoid that in the future. So that's about it. We're a young family in Cameron. We love this town, and we want to make it our home for many more years. But it's a struggle. It's I think the third highest cost of living in this country, and I think that what makes a wonderful community is having a good variety of great people, including professionals and young families. And I hope that we're able to work together to make something work so that we can come up with a positive solution for this.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. Board members, questions of Mr. Morris? Mr. Scott? Ms. Mara? Ms. Coos?
No, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. The board appreciates very much your evidence today. I wonder if then we could go to Mr. Bjorga again with the town as the development officer, and perhaps he would have some closing remarks, comments, or clarifications as well, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I will touch on a few points that were raised in the discussion this afternoon in closing. Firstly, I'd like to remind everyone that no prior decision of the Subdivision and Development Appeals Board is precedent setting. Each case is decided on its own merits given the specific circumstances and the relevant regulations in the Land Use Bylaw and the Municipal Government Act. The notices were brought up many times, and this is in reference to the notice of decision. There was a delay in this case in the steps throughout the process, but all of the appropriate steps were taken in notification, and the assertion that the development permit would have been issued had we not been notified by the appellant is simply not true. We issued the notice of decision, and we wait for photographs to be submitted by the applicant proving that they posted the notice on site, and the appeal period starts at that point. So we appreciate the communication from the appellant on that, allowed us to issue some reminders. But in the end, it only resulted in a delay in the notification process, and all the required steps were followed. The identification sign, which Mr. Morris showed us a picture of, that is required under the Land Use Bylaw, and the purpose is actually stated in the bed and breakfast section that it is for notification of guests, identification for guests to be able to identify a bed and breakfast. And if it was removed while the bed and breakfast was not in operation, then that's not a problem to us. And it's an easy fix to install it again if the bed and breakfast is in operation. With parking, we've seen that the minimum 2 stalls have been provided. Whether the stalls are in use at all times is very difficult for us to control or enforce. Whether the parking spaces are being used, how many household vehicles there are. The street we want to restate is for public use, and we have no indication that there's a parking problem on this street that would necessitate any additional requirements being made. The inspection of the bed and breakfast. Typically, we inspect new bed and breakfasts. There aren't typically inspections completed on renewals unless we've received some kind of complaint that would necessitate us to make that inspection. In this case, we received the concerns after we had already issued a decision, and the photographs and conversations with the applicant were deemed to be enough to satisfy us that the land use bylaw requirements were being met. To clarify this, the basement level of this property was not approved as a suite. So the regulation that the appellant cited that suites cannot be used as a bed and breakfast does not apply in this case. It was not approved or constructed as a separate dwelling unit. The advertising on sites such as Airbnb, there is no stipulation in the land use bylaw as to how a bed and breakfast can be advertised. And we may be thinking of the definition of a tourist home, which mentions an aspect of a tourist home can include advertising on short-term rental sites such as Airbnb. But it's important not to confuse that with automatically making a bed and breakfast a tourist home. It doesn't say that a bed and breakfast can't use those same advertising services, again, as long as it's in line with what the town has approved under their bed and breakfast permit. The effect to the neighborhood, again, we hadn't received any complaints that there was any material or observable nuisance or impact that this operation was causing to the neighborhood, albeit it was operated in a limited capacity during the initial approval term. Lastly, I wanted to touch on the consuming of food versus cooking and food preparation. The bylaw simply says that there can't be cooking and food preparation facilities within the bed and breakfast rental area. It doesn't say anything further about what those facilities involve specifically. We have relied on the definition of dwelling unit and kitchen in the land use bylaw in the past for guidance, but there is no hard and fast rule on what kind of facilities constitute cooking or food preparation. We do our best to provide guidance to the applicants when their operation is being reviewed. There is no prohibition on consuming food within the rental area. It is strictly cooking and food preparation, which is regulated. And lastly, the level of interaction with the host is also something that's not addressed. It's in the land use bylaw. It's an operational detail which we don't get into apart from the relevant land use bylaw regulations on access and food preparation. And we also recognize that during COVID, many of these operations had to adapt and change the way they operated in order to continue their business as best they could during those times. And I'll leave it there. Happy to take any closing questions from the board.
Thank you, Mr. Bjorga. Board members, any questions? Mr. Scott, none. Ms. Coos. None. Ms. Mara? None. Thank you, Mr. Berger. That completes the board's examination of your materials. We appreciate very much your participation. That brings us then to the point where Mr. Keenan, if you could come back online again for just a moment. I just want to make sure that you feel that that you've had an adequate hearing today, that you've had the opportunity to put all of your points forward, and that we have had a fair hearing today. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that statement.
Thank you, Mr. Keenan. Now I'm going to ask Mr. Morris the same question. Mr. Morris, I just want to make sure you two have had adequate opportunity to give us all of the information you think is relevant and that you feel this has been a fair hearing from your perspective.
You betcha. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. This hearing is now concluded, and in accordance with the provincial regulations, we will issue a decision within 15 days of today's date. And there's no decision will be binding at all until that written decision has been issued. So at this point, I move the board adjourn today's date of May the 11th. All those in favor? Thank you.